Hello, welcome back. Jan Aage Fjortoft, the former Blade, the former Barnsley striker, former Borough striker, and not forgetting Swindon Town, because we'll come to that in part two here, is still with us. Thank you, Jan. And a debut on the show for the newest writer, I suppose, on the Blades block, works for Yorkshire Live, follows Sheffield United very closely. Nathan Hemmingham. Welcome to you, Nathan.
Hi, Alan. Good pleasure to be here.
Yeah, and it's a very vital weekend coming up for the Blades, isn't it? That basement battle, I suppose it would be billed at West Bromwich.
Yeah, it's certainly not. It's certainly a game that they can't afford to lose, and you would probably argue that it's actually a must-win game after the start that they've had. So it's an interesting one. Both teams without a win. Both teams have not been far off that win in the last few games. So. There's going to be a lot of pressure on that game, and United really have to take the 3 points from that to really give themselves a chance going into the next few games.
1 point from 9 games so far, but Jan, you've experienced brinkmanship and an escape act from a far worse situation, haven't you? Swindon Town, who you joined in 1993. In 93, you were newly promoted to the top flight, and Swindon failed to win any of the first 16 games, which was similar actually to Dave Bassett's Sheffield United in 1990, and they stayed up. Then you scored 13 goals yourself, I think, but it wasn't enough to avoid the drop. You came quite close.
Yeah, we came quite close, but I mean, there is a small difference between us and Sheffield United, as Sheffield United showed last year that they had the ability to be up there with the best. I mean, we came as a freshman into the Premiership. We were maybe a bit naive. We scored a lot of goals, but we conceded 100. We scored a same amount of goals, I think, like Arsenal. They were 4th or 5th, but we couldn't stop conceding goals. And I agree. There are some must wins around, and like this against Albion. Having said that, I mean, it's all a matter of the confidence you got. And I was the kind of person in that, because when I came to England, somehow I couldn't score. First game I played was at Sheffield United in England, by the way. Swindon played there at Bramall Lane. I got a small injury. I was struggling like the rest of the team. And kind of you lose your confidence. And not only is it's so important to get those 3 points, but it's also important to get those 3 points for your heads, that you feel that we can still do it. Because I guess in the Sheffield United camp now, as there are in the relegation zone, there are some doubters. You start doubting on not only on your team. I mean, that is okay because you can share with a lot of people, but you start doubting yourself. So I think that is so important to win games, to kind of re-establish that confidence in yourself.
Yeah, Sheffield United maybe players, Chris Wilder has alluded to this, maybe not playing as instinctively as they were at one time. We'll bring Nathan in on that, but I know that you're a busy guy, Jan, and you've got a meeting to go to. But just before you do, I'm just wondering if there's an incident here that you recall. It was when you were playing against Manchester United and a certain Roy Keane. Have a look at this.
Strengths. It was last season. Oh dear me, that's not a tackle, that's a fist. That's Roy Keane swinging. Red card. Keane's off. Keane is off. And yellow card for the...
Right, so I don't know if the lights went out there, Jan, but what do you recall now of the incident in which Roy Keane was correctly sent off, by the way, playing for Manchester United?
And he knew it straight away, Roy Keane, I think it was to be sent off. I mean, so many years after, there's some funny part of it. First of all, I'm so happy that I didn't dive or anything. I didn't make a meal out of it. He just knocked me down like a boxer, and I didn't even go down, so I'm very proud of that. And secondly, 3-4 days after, our manager was the Manchester United legend Brian Robson. The assistant manager was Viv Anderson. We had Clayton Blackmore who played for Manchester United. So we wrote a letter to the FA to tell him to get away with it. No, don't let him be suspended. And they said, Jan, can you sign it? Of course I can. I don't care if he can't play in another team. And then when the season was over, we went to Sardinia, to Italy, to holiday. The first one I met walking into the restaurant was, of course, Roy Keane. And I still meet Roy Keane at the Champions League games. And I always do like this. Oh, don't hit me, don't hit me. So, I mean, that is just a funny part of a funny incident, so to say.
Yeah, well, getting you to write a plea for leniency to a fella who punched you full in the face is going some. But just finally, before you leave us, what kind of a fella is Roy Keane in your experience?
First of all, he was a fantastic football player. I mean, he had in Germany they always use that terms of the numbers. He's a number 6, he's a number 8, he's a number 10. The 6 being the guy who can keep the balance in the team. The 8 being just in the middle of the 10 of the playmaker. But Roy Keane at that time, not only was he a great leader on and off the pitch, but he also had a lot of skills that made Manchester United so good. And I mean, there's a lot of talking about Eric Cantona being the major player in that generation, and he was certainly a fantastic player. But I would also say that Roy Keane was very, very important in there. But I have to then, because Alfie Haaland, now the father, not only a former footballer, father of Erling Haaland, I mean, that what he did to him was scandalous, and he should never have done that. But at the end of the day, he was a fantastic, great footballer. And he's the Irish guy that is a very sharp, and he has opinion. And I also rate him as a football pundit, because you need someone to just say things like it is, or at least your opinion. I like that.
He's certainly entertaining. Whether you agree with his views or not, he does entertain.
Exactly.
As you do, and as you have done on this show. I want to thank very much indeed Jan Aage Fjortoft. It's been lovely to see you again.
Thank you, Alan, and thank you, Nathan. See you next time.
All the best.
Bye-bye.
Take
Cheers,
care.
mate.
All the best,
Bye.
Jan.
Bye.
Thank you, Jan. Thank you, Nathan. The floor is yours. And whatever the league table might say, I'm guessing it's a great time for a football writer to be covering Sheffield United.
Well, they've certainly not been, since they got promoted to the Premier League. It's been, great for the club. They've had so much publicity, good and bad. Something that Chris always refers to, and the noise that comes with being in the Premier League. It's the most watched league in the world, and everybody has pundits and everybody has a say on your team, whether top or bottom, going well or it's not going well for you. So that's something that Sheffield United have had to try and get used to. It's not something they've, even last time when they were in the Premier League, I don't think there was this much scrutiny and coverage of the football club, and that's been something that they've had to get used to this time round. But it's really it's such a big division that there is so much noise, as Chris calls it, around your team that it's a fantastic league to be in, and you can see why everybody just wants to be in the Premier League.
We're part of the noise, aren't we?
Unfortunately, yeah. Depends, though. Obviously, I think from Chris's point of view, some of the noise is acceptable and some of the noise is understandable, but some of the stuff you hear gets said about particularly clubs like Sheffield United. The problem I have with is everybody can talk about the top 6 because we all know about the top 6, but when it comes to talking about the other 14, I never read much outside of local media where I read from anybody speaking about these other 14 clubs where they actually get it right, or they actually tell me something that of interest. It's so lazy and it's so sort of stereotypical of how they see the teams that I think some of the stuff that's been said about United in the last 18 months has just been really poor from a pundit point of view. There's not that many people actually got it right. What's happening at Sheffield United, what they're up against, little things like last season. It was just so lazy, some of the stuff that was said about them. I can understand just why it was pinned upon the dressing room wall, as Jan Aage said in his song.
Yeah, it's a very good point. It's one thing saying, well, I think Sheffield United will go down. It's another being disparaging about them. There is a way of making a prediction without offending. And I think they were just dismissed. And I think it was probably the way that they were dismissed in some quarters that caused the irritation, and quite rightly so. And yet, isn't it strange how that second season, which I think you and I, certainly I did, felt was going to be far more difficult. I tipped them with confidence to stay up last time. Nobody outside the immediate area and dare I say the manager of Sheffield United, although he hasn't conveyed this publicly, nobody outside of us actually seemed to see this kind of difficulty coming, did they?
No, because obviously people look at paper, so they look at the fact that United were in sort of League One a few years ago. So straight away, when they got promoted to the Premier League, it was down by Christmas, can't cope, they were in the League One a few years ago and all this sort of stuff. Unaware of the fact that actually, United do have something different. They were playing well, they were playing good football, and they did have some good players who we thought would take to the Premier League last season, and that was correct. But the problem with the second season is, and I don't believe in this second season syndrome, I don't think that exists now. It used to 10, 15 years ago, but there's too much effort that goes into preparing for a game nowadays with all the staff and recruitment and video analysis. You have 7, 8, 9 days between games in the Premier League. There's no team turning up to Bramall Lane unaware of how they play. So, United have not been found out by anybody, but Chris Wilder had warned at the start in pre-season that, this is going to be really tough. And it's going to be really tough simply because after that first season, you look at Sheffield United and where they've been. They were in League One 4 years ago and in the Championship for only 2 seasons. You have to evolve that squad. You have to evolve it from being a League One and Championship squad, even though the likes of Fleck and O'Connell and Egan and all them have more than shown that they're capable of being in the Premier League. You still have to evolve that squad. It's a 25-man squad, and you've only had 3 transfer windows to evolve that in. You were always going to find that the second season was going to be a lot tougher because of the reality of the Premier League and what they were up against. If you look at what Chris has spent this season, he's only spent around about 30-odd million, and he's brought in 7 players. At Premier League level, you divide that up between 7, and it shows you that, what they've been up against. And you still look at that squad, and it still needs a lot of work. And there's an argument to suggest the first team still needs a lot of work. But financially, United are really up against it, because when you've, I think is it 3 seasons they'd had in the Premier League, in the Premier League history before Chris Wilder took them up there, you're going up against teams that's banked all that money for so long. You're always going to find that you're going to struggle financially. And that is what one of Sheffield United's biggest problems is. They can't evolve the squad quick enough because of the finances involved. So they were always going to find that the second season was always going to be difficult because they would have to overachieve again. And the problem in the Premier League is you can only overachieve for so long before reality bites. And I think Sheffield United have found this season that it's been tough. They've lost their star player who they can't find a solution to. And if you've seen some of the games as well, Alan, this season, they're not a million miles off. 6 of the defeats have been by 1 goal. They're missing out on big moments in the game. Those big moments that went for them last season, they're not going for them this year. And you put everything together. It was a perfect storm last season. Momentum, no players getting injured, crowd behind them, big moments in games going for them. This season, it's a perfect mix. But the other way, they've lost their key players, they've lost their fans. Players are just below their levels, and all the big moments in games. You were there on Sunday against West Ham. Yeah. George Baldock scores that after 3 minutes. It's a different game. Some of the McBurney chances, if they go in, a different game, and then it was always going to be settled by that one moment, and West Ham found that one moment with Haller's strike, and that is Sheffield United's season. This campaign really in that one game right there.
It's become to turn it around an imperfect storm, isn't it?
Yeah.
And taking your point about the expenditure, I mean, most of even these big deals have just been a down payment of 5 million. So it's certainly not exhausted the revenues that Chris Wilder has brought into the club. And I think the key to it all is that he's still really restricted to signing up-and-coming players from a level below and backing their potential, as in the case of Rhian Brewster, who's on, I think, around £30,000 a week. You've got to double that at least in order to buy a ready-made, proven Premier League player. And that is what, even now, Chris Wilder, as far as I can see, is unable to afford. I wonder if January can be any different.
Well, there's a big January window coming up because you've got to look at that and say, what do the board do? Do they, if United have got a few wins between now and Christmas and they're third bottom, fourth bottom, I think there's scope there to turn around and say, right, let's try and save the season. If they're rock bottom with 3 or 4 points, I wonder if they turn around and say, do you know what? Let's accept our fate. Let's do a Burnley. Let's go down. Let's keep intact. Let's come back up again. So there's a big decision to be made at board level of what happens in January. But there's no question that the signings are difficult for Sheffield United. And, you know, people are making a lot of noise about the money spent on Ramsdale and Brewster. But there has to be a reality of Premier League football and the animal that the Premier League is. The transfer fees don't determine your success because, like you say, they're all spread out over 3 or 4 years. Ryan Brewster is £5 million a year. Aaron Ramsdale is £5 million a year. These are the two best. This is the England under-21 keeper and the England under-21 striker at £5 million a year. Okay, that's a nothing transfer in today's world. What determines your success is the wage bill. And unfortunately, understandably, United have come up from the Championship. They've doubled their wage bill in the sense that they've given their players the promotion bonuses that every club has. They've then, fans forget that they've then given 7 or 8 players new contracts, and you add that up, and you've just added £100,000 a week to the wage bill and got nothing for it. You know, they're not taking this into account, that United have probably tripled their wage bill since getting promoted, but yet they're still in the 20 to 30k bracket. Now, that's been a difficult problem for Chris to try and get round, is how do I find Premier League talent on that wage bill? Now, if you look at the players that he went for Ollie Watkins, couldn't get nowhere near him. He's gone to Aston Villa for 33 million and he's on 75k a week. You know, you look at players who were a lot cheaper than Ryan Brewster, for example. Callum Wilson went for 20 million, a proven Premier League goal scorer, but he's on 100,000 a week. You know, Andre Gray, a Premier League striker who got relegated with Watford, he would have been available at a lot less than 20 million, but he's on 75k a week. You know, and this is what people don't sort of understand, that it's not about just signing players and it's about the transfer fee. All players have their wages, and if you're spending 30, 40 million pound on a player, he comes in a certain wage bracket. So you have to go into a certain pond, and unfortunately right now, a 20 to 30k wage bill gets you youngsters and Championship players who you have to try and get a tune out of, you have to try and develop, and that is unfortunately the market that United are in right now, and they're finding that difficult to find that Premier League talent.
Absolutely right. I think a lot of the struggle is to do with, well, 2 or 3 factors. I think one, perhaps certain players haven't hit the levels that they did last year. Not everybody's stayed fit. And I think Sheffield United had far more to lose from no fans in the ground than almost any other club, because they had a wonderful atmosphere at its absolute peak, and they've lost that momentum from there. But Jack O'Connell in particular, of all the players that they could afford to lose, for me, he's the least they could afford to lose. And you can't really replicate what he brought to the team in that special role within that special system of the overlapping centre-backs. You can't think of a single person in the squad, and it's hard to think of a single person anywhere else who could come in and do what Jack O'Connell does. Can you?
See, that's the thing, because how do you go and scout a position that doesn't exist in football? It doesn't exist. There's only United who play with overlapping centre half, so you can't say to Paul Mitchell and the recruitment team, go and get me a overlapping centre half. They don't exist. So you have to try and bring players in with the attributes, you know, ball carrying, defensively, you know, ability and fitness and pace and etc., and then try and work with them. Now, it's not rocket science to watch Sheffield United and work out that they're struggling down the left-hand side, and that the loss of Jack O'Connell has hit them harder than I think any other player losing, or Chris Basham, for example. Losing any of those 2 players would hit them harder than losing any other player, because they have cover. They have cover for every other player. They don't have left-sided and right-centred overlapping centre-half cover through nature of the position. So when you've got somebody like Jack who spent 4 years in that role, played virtually and ever present every year, you know, you're going to miss what he brings to that team, the fluidity and the understanding of that role, what he brings going forward, what he does defensively. You know, defensively, United are conceding goals that they didn't concede with him in the team, and they've kind of lost 50% of their attacking threat because of the fact that that fluidity down the left is gone. Now, I've seen a lot of calls for Chris to change the system because of the fact that they're struggling without Jack, but I don't subscribe to that. I don't believe the system is at fault. We've watched enough games this season, Alan. They're not getting turned over. Teams aren't finding Sheffield United easy to play against. Okay, if they were, they wouldn't have lost 6 out of their 8 games by 1 goal. Teams will be putting 3 and 4 past them. Liverpool and Man City, you know, they were not easy games for those 2 teams. And if United had a problem tactically, teams will be rolling them over. You know, if you look at United's performances, the Leeds goalkeeper was man of the match. Fulham got annihilated for 45 minutes. And even West Ham, that game could have gone either way. So tactically, United aren't all at sorts. I'm not watching Sheffield United this season thinking, Chris has got a problem over there, he's got a problem there, he's got a problem with that one. All I see is a problem with one area, and that's the left-hand side. So after 4 years of an almost faultless system and formation, do you then just rip it up 8 games into a season because of one issue? Or do you try and find a way around it? And I think you've got to try and find a way around it, because if you look at the practicalities of it all as well, we're 9 games into a season and we've had 3 international breaks. So for 2 weeks on 3 occasions this season, Chris has lost 8 to 9 of his first 11 anyway. So I don't think you go to Shirecliffe one Monday morning and say, right, for the next 5 days, we're going to work on a new formation, a new system. And we're going to walk through it for 5 days in training, and then I'm going to chuck you in on Saturday against world-class players and say, good luck with that. You don't do it. It's not feasible to just suddenly change now and spend 5 days at Shirecliffe walking through a new formation. It doesn't show a manager who believes in his system. It doesn't show a manager who believes in his players. And it doesn't show a manager that is believing in what they're doing right now. They've got to stick with their system. The system's not at fault. They just need to take the chances and the big moments in games that are not going for them. They need them to go for them. And I think that's the massive difference.
Yeah, valid discussion, but not for now. Couldn't agree with you more. And Nathan, thanks very much indeed for joining us. It's been another cracking show. Thanks to Jan Aage Fjortoft for joining us earlier. Nathan, it was great to hear your take on Sheffield United. Thanks to you for watching. And we'll be back with another show quite soon. Hope you can join us then. Meantime, take care. Bye-bye.